very big garden down the south of France, and I probably worked for maybe 5 years for them, and they would get a piece of work in the spring and a piece of work in the autumn.
Right.
And that was to tie together the gardens. They're all exterior works. They're all painted the same green. But this guy, Tim Rees, who was the garden designer, he'd been working on this site, and there was like, I think 13 formal gardens. It was 4 hectares,
right.
House in the middle, spread all around. And there's like a veg garden and another cottage down the bottom, and then the Roman gardens and the French gardens, and then wild meadows around the back. They wanted something to tie everything together.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it was a repeat custom, and they were all individual pieces that worked in their own right, but they all leaned on each other for design elements. So there was a theme that sort of ran. You could tell they were connected, but they weren't the same. So I think that adds to the meaning, maybe, because they're all of the same story. Is that sort of what you mean?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Because with a lot of architectural stuff, I think a lot of the value gets put into the function and the aesthetics of them. A lot of people get a gate because they want a gate to, they need something to do the job of a gate.
Do you know what? In my experience, that's what they say.
Yeah.
But that's seldom what they mean.
Right.
Yeah, and the reason they come to me isn't just because they want a gate. They want a gate that means something to them, or to the property, or to their story.
Right. Yeah.
Often. Yeah, it's. I think the relationship between the client and the maker is often a lot deeper than the one for the actual object.
Right.
In fact, I'd go as far as to say I really worry when someone comes to me just because I'm a blacksmith and blacksmiths do a railing or a gate or whatever.
Okay.
I'm generally looking for people who come to me because they've got a problem and they like the way I solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's very tied up with that wanting a gate. I'm a blacksmith.
Yeah, of course.
So it's very tied up with that. But people who pick me just because I'm a blacksmith, I worry about. People who pick me because I'm Ambrose Burne, I know that's going to be a good job.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So,
because I think I bring more. I don't bring more. I bring something different
than just a blacksmith. It's your way of doing it.
Yeah, and it's about the interaction I have with the person.
Yeah.
About what they get, because it's another example. I think a small example. So there was this couple up on the top of the Golden Valley. They needed some handrails because, and that did turn into a repeat custom actually. Basically, she wasn't as steady on her feet, but they had a beautiful house in a beautiful spot, and they didn't want it to be ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So they came to me because what they'd seen in my work was good looking. They liked the style of it, and she didn't want to admit she was old and frail. So she didn't want municipal handrails everywhere. So that's why they came to me, not just because I was a blacksmith, but because they liked my style.
Okay.
They could have got the problem solved cheaper in other ways, but it wouldn't have solved their aesthetic needs or their... He was an architect, so they needed to be seen to be people who had taste.
Okay.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's part of why they came to me. It wasn't just for handrail. They needed a tasteful handrail.
Okay.
And then it ended up, they, did that, lovely. And then a couple of years later, they were converting a barn and she couldn't get up the steps. So again, handrail, little railing. They saw the railings I did for the Cider Museum and they liked the motifs in that, and it was an old Apple store.
Yeah.
So again, they came to me, hopefully good taste, well made, it's what they're about. It's an Apple store, so it tells the story of the building and adds to it, because I did like an Apple railing panel.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of meanings there.
Yeah.
Before we've got to, she was old and frail. You have to have a handrail to get up the stairs for her to feel safe.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yeah, sort of. That's kind of more the meaning of the object being generated from different aspects of a place. What I'm kind of getting at is how... yeah, it is that in a lot of senses. So what I've got for most of it is how the object sort of takes on personal characteristics through the experience that someone has with it, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. So what's a good example of that? So the ginkgo arbor, steeped in meaning.
Yeah.
Both in how the idea happened and what was being processed by the people doing it. So when I did that, I just lost a really, really good friend, practically a brother, to cancer. You know, died way before his time.
Right.
So in a way, it was quite healing for me making it. Dell had also, it wasn't cancer, but she had lost someone who was super special to her. So it was part of her grieving process going through that. And Jacob lost his mum just before we started the project, and she was at St Michael's. So there was, I didn't really appreciate how fresh it was for him, but you know, there we are. So it was super relevant for him.
Yeah.
And that's before we were talking about what we made. Then, of course, so we did the ginkgos because ginkgo biloba is it's used in medicine a lot, and it's predominantly used medicines to do brain function.
Okay.
So it's already steeped in memory. You know, it has huge amounts of symbolism to do with memory. And that's why it was chosen. It's also chosen on the practical side of why you don't want to do public art. As in, what can we do that people can be super proud of, but no matter how hard they try, they can't really fuck it up.
Yeah.
Not going to make something horrible. But also, what's going to create a really good memory for them doing it.
Right.
So now, you know, we've got 1,000 or more of those ginkgo leaves. That means a large proportion of people have got a strong memory of making that object. They now have ownership over that object. They have a memory and meaning that relates to that object and that place. So it was quite good for that. Just this last weekend, we were back over at Beck's mum's for Sunday dinner, you know, standard. But one of her very good friends has just lost her husband. She lost him to cancer. He spent a lot of his time at the hospice. One of her very fond memories was sitting in the rose arbour, the ginkgo arbour, at St Michael's. So I gave Val ginkgo leaf because I got a bunch of spares.
Right.
So I gave one to her to give to this lady. So she now has an object that she can keep to remind her of her husband and that memory. So it's kind of taken on.
Yeah.
It will inevitably take on those extra lives that I can't predict, or I guess I knew I was setting that situation up, but I didn't force it in any way. So I think that object gains more weight through that.
Yeah.
The very fact, I mean, I haven't visited it in ages. I really should go and have a look. But I blackened all the wood, and the more it gets used, surely the more it's going to pick up from people's legs or trousers or bums or whatever. So it will start to show those marks of being used, adding to its memory, maybe adding to its power. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that the sort of thing?
Yeah, it is. That's what I'm getting at. It's the added power that objects have through being experienced and through the experiences they have.
Yeah.
As they exist.
So do you know about the, I don't know how recorded, it must be recorded somewhere, the fashion of leaving your mark? So where there's famous hills to climb, people will take a pebble with them.
Right.
And they'll put it on the pile at the top of the hill. And it's called a cairn.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
These massive piles. Or you see famous sculptures. Like, it's good luck in Ireland to kiss the Blarney Stone, yeah?
Right.
So the Blarney Stone is now really polished because people go up and kiss it.
Yeah.
There's every city has a sculpture where it's good luck to touch a certain bit, and that bit inevitably becomes super polished, just like a well-used handrail will be shiny at a certain point.
Yeah.
That's the point everyone grabs it. It's my favourite bit of Adam's sculpture in town. You know, the three sails.
Yeah.
That ring where the kids have spun round.
Yeah.
Left their hand mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have those marks. So is that, what's the right word? The indexical marks through a life well lived, are they part of that added memory to things?
I think that's going, like you said, more down the indexical evidence of those experiences. I'm just kind of getting at the ways in which they can be experienced. So how a maker shares themselves through making, how a consumer interprets and receives someone else's ideas through receiving the object, how people share themselves through objects when they exchange them, such as gifts and things, and things like that. So it's kind of the sharing of experience and of each other through objects, and how they've accumulated that through their object life.
Well, that sort of ties into what we were talking about in the kitchen. Whose trowel do you want? I quite want a John Joe trowel. Not yet. I'm really pleased I've got a Joel Black knife. I was super sceptical about the whole blade world. Obviously, you know, the position I'm in, and you can guess the amount of people who come and want to have informed conversations about knives with me.
Yeah.
How boring I must find that. And I'm so pleased I didn't get one of Joel's graduating knives.
Really?
You know, he's a proper big grown up now, and he's really, over the last 5 years, really honed it. And the knife's a beautiful object. And I know from various sources that he was really, really chuffed that that's what I wanted. My sister was like, I'm going to buy you a good present. What will it be? And then she found out about this. She rang him up and he's like, oh, Ambrose wants one of those things. So, yes, some money changed hands, but that isn't the important bit.
Yeah.
The important bit is that I own one of his objects.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to be what I say, you know. Fewer better things. I want don't want to have loads of stuff. I don't have aspirations to own a Ferrari or anything like that.
Yeah.
But a handmade knife with the added bonus of being from someone who was my student, has set up their own practice, and now has a practice I really respect. That means loads to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, which trowel do you want? James Wood's one might be better, but I've only met him once. Whereas Sam, we've been through an awful lot together, both as students, and he came and worked with me afterwards. So if I was to have one of those trowels, every time I use that trowel, it's going to bring all of that with it, because I have a connection to him.
Yeah, sort of an index of your relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I've known him since he was in your position. He's now full-grown adult with his own workshop and business, and we consider each other equals. So it's having an object that relates to that whole journey. Yeah. I guess, it has much more meaning than any £500 that I'd ever spend on an object. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. The money or the function becomes not the most interesting part of it at all.
No. Do you use it for its normal function, or is it kind of just a mantelpiece then?
I don't have a trowel. Oh, the knife? I use it all the time.
Yeah.
We have fried onions a lot more often, just because it's really great chopping onions.
That's brilliant. That's really interesting. I hadn't considered them being markers of someone's journey, especially not from like a maker's point of view. That's really interesting.
Well, I guess I have a fairly unique position because I am a professional in the craft. I make things for people. That's what my main function is. But also, I teach, which in a way I guess is making things for people, or it's helping people to be able to make their thing for others again. So it's passing along again. But also, if we average 20 students a year, this is my 12th year, that means I've had 240 students. Some good, some bad, some ugly, whatever. But I do, those objects are markers. And I've got a lot more markers of those people. I guess those are two examples that have gone into being bought products, which I now have, so that's slightly different. At Sam's wedding, he forged the table where the candle holders, and at the end of the day, it's like, everyone take a candle holder. You know, he did it because he's not stupid. He knew he was going to get a lot more than the 35 quid he'd ever get for selling it. Because half the people at his wedding are about to have weddings. Yeah. So he's effectively sold 100 instead of selling 10, hasn't he?
Yeah, that makes,
He's a slight
That's
bastard.
a good bit of business, that, isn't it?
Yeah. But also, I have an object that reminds me of Sam. It reminds me of everything he's learned and everything he's become. But it also reminds me of his wedding day. You know, it's a really significant object. It's just a fucking candlestick. I might even have it in the van. It's pretty simple, but it's dead clever. But it's got so much more than just being a candlestick.
There's a lot to that.
There's loads to it. I don't know if this is helpful for your dissertation and stuff,
it is,
but
actually.
it's because I don't know if you'll find this written down anywhere. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But it's objects often have a lot more meaning than Jesus Christ, I've got to get this candle standing up and not trip on the floor. How am I going to do that? You know, in fact, that's now I've described it that way. The fact that it holds a candle is probably way down on the list of its functions.
It's just what gives it its name, really, isn't it?
But I'll have that unless I lose it, which I don't imagine I will. I'll have that object forever. Reuben will have that. Reuben's grandchild will have that. And it'll have all those stories with that.
Yeah.
And it'll probably have more.
Yeah. So it accumulates more history as it goes, as it's experienced through time.
Yeah.
By other people. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
So, to take that one step further, and I'm presuming a bit, Sam and Matt were early students of mine. They were both good friends. Once they graduated, was when I was doing that project I was telling you about before, the French one.
Mm-hmm.
They both helped me out on it.
Right.
And I can't remember who said it now, but in jest it was said, "Are you having a trial run with your boys?" Sam's very tall, slim, quite incisive, very northern, quite restrained and dry.
Mm-hmm.
Matt is just full power. He's like a go and stop person.
Right.
Everywhere. So he's just like Felix,
Mm.
and Sam's just like Reuben. And they're like, he's having a go. See what because they were little at the time, like 4 or 5. He's seeing what it's going to be like having Sam and Reuben when they're big. So it's always been a joke that they're the boys, just like our boys. Because of that story, and Reuben sees Sam as Uncle Sam or Brother Sam, even though they're not related at all. I'm sure Reuben will have that candlestick at his wedding table. He might not get Sam there. He might not. Who knows? But he'll have the candlestick on his top table.
Yeah.
Therefore, any children he has will, in the fullness of time, own that candlestick themselves.
Yeah.
And it will have those stories that go with it. Sooner or later, whoever owns that candlestick will not know Sam, will have never met Sam, may never meet me, but they will have that story.
Yeah.
So that candlestick isn't a candlestick anymore, is it?
No.
It's a talisman.
Yeah.
That's sort of what you're asking about,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is, yeah. And then, so from there, because I'm kind of wanting to attribute it to the work I want to do, which is going to be architectural metalwork, that is what I was kind of getting at. Are there any instances of your work or work that you know of that people have accumulated these histories through and experience through? Because it seems quite a strange thing to attribute, experience to something like a gate. But it must be possible.
I don't think I'm old enough yet.
Right, it's the matter of time, isn't it?
Yeah, but I have worked at places where they've moved pieces of ironwork for people.
Right.
So someone moves into a house, orders a gate, does all the thing. Turns out that the gate had loads more meaning than they thought. They thought they just wanted to stop the dogs escaping, but they ended up having a good relationship with the person that I had worked for. They got on really well, they loved the gate. They ended up, situation changed, so they ended up selling the house, moving to another house. The gate was one of the significant pieces they took with them. So either the gate gets modified to fit the new place, or the new place gets modified to fit the gate. I've seen that situation quite a lot.
Right.
And that's what I mean, I'm not old enough.
Yeah.
I hope that people who buy, particularly gates, because railings are hard to move, but particularly a gate, I hope they value them enough that they would take it with them when they moved.
Yeah.
I'd be quite touched if that was the situation.
Yeah. Because that's your relationship between yourself and the customer.
Well,
much more powerful.
Yeah, it proves that was a job well done, and that object has meaning for the person who owns it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd say I'd be really pleased, and I have experienced that, and I know others who have. But you can't guarantee it, can you?
No.
What if it was a deal changer? The person who's buying the house, like, well, you've got to leave me that gate, and I don't actually care about the house. I just really like the gate. That's why I'm buying this. But how does that relate to you in practice? That's why we go the extra mile.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we make quality items.
Right.
So they do mean more. You remember in our walk last year when we looked at all the metalwork along the street?
Yeah.
So much of that was addressed for just the need of a railing or a gate.
Yeah.
And therefore price was the major factor. And therefore people didn't build a relationship with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it just gets forgotten about, and it was any old metalwork along the road.
Yeah. And
we saw that quite plainly.
Yeah.
And I think this is why people say that blacksmiths don't exist anymore. It's not because there isn't metalwork out there, it's because everyone's become so blind to it because there's so much shite out there that people don't have a relationship with.
Yeah.
And if people did have more of a relationship, and it would mean investing a little bit more money and time and emotion into the object,
yeah,
we'd have a lot less waste.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Because 9 out of 10 of all those pieces we looked at are destined for the bin sooner or later, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
So that is a huge waste of energy. Whereas, Henry's gates at the end, no one's throwing them away.
No.
Not that I think the church is going to fall down, but even if they get moved from there, they'll go to a reclamation yard. So they're enough quality that anyone can see they're not to be chucked in the bin.
Yeah, but that's investment from a customer in the first place to want something to attach value to, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a threshold into a church.
Yeah.
It has to reek of value.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't look right in the place.
Yeah. So it's not standalone objects that are given value. It's like an interconnected web of how all these values come together and
it's not quite
into
as
one
simple as I need something that's gonna generate value.
Yeah.
Because value is one of those funny things. Well, not value. Emotion and connection. It's one of those difficult things that you can't really predict, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't know the relationship you're going to have with any given object. Why do I love the pickup I had, but the transit van I couldn't care about?
Really?
They were both bought for the same reason.
Yeah.
One just had more character than the other. One.
So that's how you experience the object then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you never know till you've experienced it.
That comes back to function again, though, doesn't it? So that's your experience of the function rather than just the job it does, if that makes sense. Those two are kind of different, aren't they?
And that's what we talked about before with the need for a gate or a knife or whatever.
Yeah.
There's loads cheaper ways to get the problem solved than asking me. Just like I could probably get a better, sharper, quicker knife than Joel Black's one for less money.
Yeah.
But I value the Joel Black one. Nothing I could spend my money on would give me some of the things I talked about that knife will.
Yeah. Yeah, that's different from the pickup though, isn't it? Because one you're already emotionally attached to. You've kind of decided already that you're going to enjoy that object. Whereas the pickup you've learned to enjoy through the experience of it. Yeah.
It was a fucking awful vehicle. But I'm really upset that I go to the scrap now. Yeah, I don't know, it's funny. Those things we attribute value to.
Yeah.
And the experience of it.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's not, is it? well, it's not you deciding that the knife was going to have value already. It was you experiencing the relationship that then gave value to the knife.
It could have been pretty shit, the knife, couldn't it, really?
It wouldn't matter.
The odds were stacked in its favour.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not shit.
Yeah.
But it's far from the point.
Yeah.
I guess my sister could have spent the same money and got something equally as functional.
Yeah.
From, there's a lot of knife makers out there, isn't there?
Mm.
But again, there's no way it would have had some of those qualities that I talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting one.
Yeah. So one of them, I suppose, is, well, they both act the same. So relationships with people and relationships with objects are extremely similar. Both dialogues, in a lot of sense. Especially with functional items that you really do have a dialogue with, like the gaze.
Yeah. Well, do you remember my hammer talk last year?
Yeah.
It was a bit weird because it was COVID.
Yeah.
But talked about all my hammers.
Mm.
And at the end of it, Josh was like, that was a talk about value and attachment and story.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a talk about hammers. And he was right.
Yeah. 100%.
100% right. And it was a talk about the objects I own and how I see myself and how I see others through the objects that I have, particularly ones that had story and meaning with them.
Yeah. Can you think of anything in particular? Any that jump out?
Well, that guy Matt I mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
His hammers, they're probably not my most used hammers, but there's no way I'd be without them.
Right.
Because he used to wind everyone up at the forge because he was really into hammers, and that was a bit frowned upon at the time. But he used to get in there and he'd smash out a hammer before anyone else had even turned up.
Right.
Called it a breakfast hammer. And they were pretty shit, to be honest. Well, they started shitty, but he's done enough of them now that they're quite good. And then he did college, and I was always upset that he never did hammers for his practical work. But like I said, it was frowned on a bit then.
Right.
And he finished college, he went off to Italy, worked for a guy, flew back in for graduation. And at graduation, he gave me a hammer. It's like, I've done it, made a good hammer. So I was walking around in my suit with a hammer in my pocket. And I look back at it now and it's pretty shoddy.
Right.
But it doesn't matter, because it reminds me of all that. He ended up working for me for a bit, and it was when he was working for me, I just installed my big power hammer. So at the end of the day, when the furnace was still hot, we'd chuck a nugget in, have a bit of a play about, and generally make hammers. Didn't really want to think about what to do. It was, recreational blacksmithing. So I've got a bunch of these hammers that we made together. Thus, I was mainly doing it so I could learn how to use the power hammer. I didn't care about the actual object.
Right.
But because we made them together, and they were useful objects, I guess they've grown in their meaning, because I do use them in real life now. Time goes on, he gets different jobs, he now lives in America. He came back from America once on a bit of a holiday, came to my workshop, another joint friend of ours is there, and he's like, I got something for you boys, look, I finally did it. Here's a hammer I'm proud of. Give us one each. Jack's like, oh, bloody hell, kill a monkey with that, that's good. So now that's my hammer, it's called the Monkey Killer.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's from him. So I've now got 10 years worth of post-graduating story objects. when he next comes over, I don't know, he might bring me a hammer. When I go over to his place in Charleston, I'll definitely make a hammer with him. Making hammers isn't something I do, but that is something we will do.
That's really powerful, isn't it? That?
Yeah.
How that process and how those objects stand for so much more.
So he's got a 5-pack of shit French hammers that I bought from the Bric-a-Marché, which is like French B&Q.
Right.
Because he was helping me fit in France, and I don't know what happened. We were all living together and working together. It's all pretty intense. Anyway, he's a bit upset. I don't know, but he's just having a hard time. He's been away from home for too long. So while I was at Bric-a-Marché, it's like, let's buy Matt some hammers. Just for a joke, you know? Silly. So I came home, it's, you know, €5 worth of hammers. It was a chuck away gesture. But, yeah, all those objects. Can you see all the different layers of meaning there?
Yeah.
Which all really revolve much more around friendship rather than revolve around the need to knock a nail in.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
The fact they're hammers, this doesn't really matter. It could have been anything.
Yeah, it's just a symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens to be hammers because that's an object that I guess connects our relationship. The reason on the Paul Simon book, it's just a black cover with a hammer on the front. The hammer is the icon of blacksmithing. It's the icon of craft and blacksmithing. Matt and I both see ourselves as blacksmiths, craftsmen. So it's our symbol. It's something we share. So you have those levels of meaning as well.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Again, I don't know how useful this is for dissertation, but it's interesting.
It is very interesting. There's different ways of looking at things like that.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was just for a bit more information about the Cider Museum project you did.
Okay, yeah.
Because just with it being sort of like, it was quite historically driven, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously. So I just wanted to hear about sort of the context that went into that, and then sort of the relationship you had with the people who commissioned it.
I got an email off Elizabeth something day before yesterday, actually. She was the director of the Cider Museum. When I did the commission, massive drawing, I wrapped it up, tied a little bow around it and tied an apple key ring onto the bow. That never came back. I'm pretty sure she had it.
Right.
I knew it was going to get one or stolen, but I knew it wasn't going to come back.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it.
Yeah.
Is that them or is that the door? Hello, it's you now. I'll be up in a minute. It's a bit like the Sam Pearce candlestick, isn't it? Because her email is saying, can we stock your key rings in the Cider Museum? How much are they going to be?
Really?
Yeah. So there's that, but that's not what you're asking about. I said it earlier, the reason I like to work to commission is because I don't necessarily like having to make all the decisions myself.
Yeah.
So when I have a historical site like that, I think it's brilliant.
Gives you a lot to work off.
I've got a load of decisions made.
Yeah.
It has to be like this because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I think research is about. And I think there's a lot of people miss the point when we say, you got to do your research. Because they see it as something that they've got to live up to, rather than just a handy friend who can go, why don't you do it like this?
Yeah.
What about this? And that's what I think research is super useful for. And that's why I like doing commission, because I like that extra meaning that people bring to things, strap onto things. Or I like being someone who can facilitate that meaning.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what I was talking about with the gates or the handrails or any commission. It's not necessarily just about the need to keep the dogs in or to be wobbly on the steps or whatever. You can bring so much more, make it so much more meaningful for the person who is going to use it.
Yeah.
And hopefully if it's meaningful, it means it gets used, it means it gets saved, it means it justifies its place in the world.
Yeah, yeah. So
it's not just any other object.
Yeah, the crafted object has the ability to accumulate more of a relationship with people.
Well, that's... I don't know it well enough, but I believe that's part of the whole theory behind Kenzuki.
What's Kenzuki?
So, you know the Japanese pots, and they've been smashed. It's got a
with
break,
the gold.
and it's got a gold.
Okay, yeah.
So they don't break it on purpose.
Right.
It's been broken because it's had a full life. And part of the full life of a mug or a bowl is that inevitably it will get broken.
Yeah, yeah.
Auntie Jane fucking broke it. So instead of chucking it away, forgetting that moment, you know, this bowl is super valuable, and Auntie Jane carried it around all the time. She inevitably dropped it, and this happened. So you do the gold lacquer because it highlights that moment.
Wow, okay.
It gives extra meaning to this moment. This object was so bloody valuable, we had to save it.
Yeah.
And that's what the Kenzuki is all about.
Yeah, highlighting the saving of it. It's a snapshot, isn't it?
Snapshot and the longevity of the object. Because now there's been that human experience with the object is so much more valuable. And that's signified by the gold scene.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, the Kenzuki talks about what you're talking about very neatly.
Yeah.
In fact, there's quite a few things in Japanese culture that will back up. In fact, that might be the text that you find is those Japanese cultures where they really, really venerate the history of an object.
Right.
So they have a special place in society for your Don Barkers of the world.
Right.
And your Don Barkers of the world give their veneration through to Andy, I can't remember his second name now. Brint.
Yeah.
So they really value an object that has been made by a craftsman. They especially value an object that was made by a craftsman whose father was a craftsman.
Right.
Or if there's 3 generations of craftsmen, you know, if that bowl, knife, gate, whatever, has that respect and lineage to it.
Yeah. The lead up to its creation almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a course with Max. We were teaching a course a couple of weeks ago up at Equinox. And we were talking about his bottle openers he does. And someone asked the classic question, well, how long did that take you? And he's like, I fucking hate that question. I don't know, 15 minutes, 15 years? You know, it didn't take me a very long time to actually make that, but it's my build-up, all my accumulated knowledge and skill that allows me to be able to make that in 15 years. And that's what that Japanese lineage history is all about. And quite rightly, that's why it's considered very venerable, you know, it's got that lead up.
Right, that's really interesting. Yeah, that could be really useful actually going forward.
But I think, I didn't think about it before, but I think looking into that Japanese culture and how they view craftsmanship and the respect they have for crafted objects, I know is written about a lot. Edmund Dual cites it quite a lot. But yeah, that might be quite useful to... You can find text about that, basically.
Yeah.
You could say that it has meaning. These objects in this culture have meaning for these reasons. Therefore, this object in our culture, although it's not written about, has these meanings.
Yeah.
And that answers a bunch of your questions, what the dissertation's asking you to do as well.
Yeah.
So that's quite canny.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
And it's super useful for you because you want to be the person making these objects in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So understanding how to utilise it and how it works is pretty.
Yeah, and how do you explain to people that that's part of what they're investing in?
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. Because, back to the beginning of the conversation, people come to me and ask me for a game. How do I let them know that all these things are going to happen?
Mm.
How do I, not let them know, that sounds a bit patronising. How do I give them access to all those things it could be? Because it can be all those things.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. For some people it will, for some people it won't. But your job is to sort of open the door for them.
Mm.
Whether they go through it or not, who knows, whatever.
Yeah.
But you can set up the situation for it to happen.
Yeah.
Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that was brilliant, really helpful. Thank you very much for that, Ambrose.
No worries. I'm going to see Will now.
Yeah, sorry for keeping you.
No, it's cool. It's an interesting conversation.